Hey folks, my name's Max Wolf. I'm a staff backend engineer on the API team. So a lot of the work I've been doing at the moment is me and one of the other engineers, Vlad. We're trying to figure out the best way to auto-generate OpenAPI 3 documentation from our Grape specs. Vlad's going to record his own video about the approach he's taking, which is based on request specs being automatically converted into specification using RSwag. And the approach I'm taking is a more direct approach where we convert the Grape APIs directly into OpenAPI 3.1 specification. I'm not going to go into too many details of like the pitfalls I found in this. I'm going to document those async. But the big takeaway here is that inconsistencies in the way that engineers write APIs, and I absolutely include myself in this over the years, will make generating OpenAPI documentation more difficult than it needs to be. So a lot of the work we're going to be doing as well over the coming months will be to enforce a bit more consistency in the way that we do that. I think it's fair to say the reason that this isn't a solved problem so far is that it's difficult. There are a lot of edge cases, a lot of, Grape is a big DSL, and there's a lot in there that could potentially trip up any sort of conversion tool. These are all things we can work through, but I think, the reason this hasn't been done is not because it's technologically impossible, but because it's technologically quite difficult. So I set myself a target to build a Grape to OpenAPI 3.1 generator prototype, proof of concept. So, don't expect 100% test coverage here, but you should expect something that works. So I wanted to build an internal Ruby gem to the monolith, and it should support the ability to extract as much useful metadata from the Grape API as possible. So HTTP methods, paths, parameters, types and descriptions, less so validations so far, and constraints, although I can totally see how we can do those now. Response schemas, object schemas based on Grape entities. Authentication requirements, partially I've implemented, but only basic auth, not OAuth. Although part of the reason of using 3 is that OAuth support should be relatively easy to add, and documentation blocks as well, although again this has shown during this work that we don't enforce for engineers that they have to write documentation for APIs in the Grape API specifically, and we should definitely move towards that. I haven't included comprehensive test coverage, I've included some test coverage. But obviously for anything that we productionize, we would definitely add that. So I picked 6 classes from across the product: audit events, environments, issues, repositories, settings, and merge request approval rules. I wanted to pick APIs from across the DevOps lifecycle, and also to varying difficulties. So for example, audit events belongs to sec. And it's a really simple API. It's just get get audit events and then get a specific audit event. Super easy. And then we get to the more complex ones that have like nesting, have EE overrides, have quite complex responses with lots of nested objects. Some of those nested objects are arrays, some aren't, etc., etc. Settings, which I set myself as sort of a stretch goal because it's massive. Although it's generating, I'm not 100% convinced the accuracy is perfect, but it is generating something. And then repositories as well. I wanted something that hit like Gitly or, something really critical to the product. Have a look through this if you want more details, but I'm just going to demo it and we can see it working now. So I'll look at the Rails console. And we've just got one sort of generation input, which takes an array of API classes. Everything using the generation API we created, and you can see it generates all of the endpoints. It handles things like enums, so where these are defined in code. Provides some examples, the examples that exist within Grape as well. Provides all the defined responses, so a lot of our APIs don't have failure responses defined, despite the fact that they will all have failure responses for things like being unauthorized or passing in bad request parameters, that kind of thing. So again, more things that we should be enforcing potentially. So that's a really easy one. Like I say, audit events is some super low hanging fruit, but let's move on to something a bit more complicated. Let's talk about listing environments, for example. We can pass in pagination, everything that's defined in the API essentially. And here's another example of an enum. That works great. This is a more complex example because it returns nested objects within an array itself. And find some more. Yeah, so for example, custom attributes here is an array of an object within an object within an object, etc., etc. And this one also defines some specific failure cases as well. And down to this last example as well. We can try it out. I haven't got a pat, but these will work lovely. And again, you can see the example response. Relying on this is much better than the current manual documentation system we have right now, which requires engineers to, whenever they make a small change to an API, to document that manually. So this should remove some of that grunt work. The only downside here is that we don't have example strings or example responses for most attributes. And so we would need to add that over time as well. Reach out to us in the API team channel if you've got any questions. And hopefully we'll have a decision on how we want to proceed in the next week or two. Thanks very much.